The first ever USA Cycling Gravel National Championships was here today in Gering, Nebraska. I raced this Argonaut GR3 with an E13 crank and 946 cassette paired to the trusty 11-speed Shimano GRX Di2 levers, and of course, my favorite Schwalbe tires. So in this video, I'll talk about the bike, different configurations, what I liked, what I didn't like so well. Talk about the race, how USA Cycling did in their first crack at a gravel national championships. First, you know what's coming, hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna go clean myself up, and honestly, I'm probably gonna finish this video tomorrow because I'm cracked. I wanna drink some beers, and the podium ceremony is here in a bit. I got second. I really wanted to get the win, get the jersey, but turns out desire alone does not win bike races. Hats off to Andrew Wright, who crushed it and went early and stuck it. There's many categories in the elite men. Keegan Swinson won, obviously a deserved winner. Similarly, Lauren Stevens, an OG gravel racer and a World Tour road racer, great deserving winners there. A number of different age categories also raced. I think the event was a success. It was small for the first year. There was maybe 500 of us or so, but I'm eager to see where this goes in the future. Before I get out of this mess, some bits about what I'm wearing, you know, trusty Castelli race kit. I went with the unlimited bibs because they've got pockets galore, side pockets, which I used this guy for trash. This was filled up to here. Another pocket over here had things like a little wipe for the lenses, which were covered in dust. People were stacking it up early this morning in the, you know, low sunlight, dust going everywhere. And there's also pockets on the back where I stick things like Dynaplug and then, you know, CO2 and breaker, just for easier access. It's easier to like grab these should you need them. I didn't need them today, which was nice. And but in addition to being faster than here, it's harder to forget to zip up your pockets, which is something I've certainly messed up when I pull stuff out of here. So I like, pockets are a good thing for gravel. Other things in the pocket. Original Bob's Pickle Potion number 9. Thanks Quentin Jones for hooking me up with this. Felt a bit like I was hitting a little thing of whiskey. Okay, I'm pretty cracked and I feel the bump coming on, so I'm gonna take a break. You hit that subscribe button. We'll meet back here and we'll talk USA Cycling's first ever Gravel National Championships, Argonaut GR3, and gravel bits. And now we're back through the miracle of video editing in my garage back in Boulder, Colorado, because it was pouring rain in Gering the day after Gravel National. So we're finishing this video up here. This video is supported by Buycycle, an international used bike marketplace that just opened up business in the US. There are more than 16,000 bikes on site now. More on that in a bit. This is a bit of a long video, so I've broken it up into chunks, and you can click on the TOC down below. We're talking about how this first ever USA Cycling Gravel National Championships was perceived by the winners, what I thought of it, how it compared to other gravel races on the calendar. Also, of course, I want to talk about the Argonaut GR3, why I picked that bike of the 15 or so bikes I've got here in the garage, and how the bike and the gear choices and the rider fared. Let's start with the course itself. Now, one thing I love about gravel gear and gravel racing is that the definition of each has not solidified yet. We're still arguing, discussing, debating about what gravel is, what gravel bikes are, and what gravel races should be. USA Cycling has been on the periphery of gravel racing since it started. Promoters decided, hey, we can do this on our own. It doesn't have to be licensed, sanctioned, categorized racing the way road racing has been done. This Nationals race was different. Safety measures were way up. The party factor was way down, and the course with all the wind and sand was quite challenging and shattering the mini groups that were broken down by categories. At Nationals, there were a ton of categories. There were kids categories, there were multiple para-athlete categories, there were age groups every 5 years, and then there were elite men and elite women's separate races, each with a phalanx of moto referees out on course. Medalist Sports ran this operation. Medalist put on races like Amden Tour of California for many years, Tour de Georgia, Missouri, all the way back to Tour de Trump, etc. folks there know what they're doing. In addition to the entire finishing chute and the curved road into it being fully fenced off, there was more than a full mile where we had an entire lane coned off. Basically, from the time we left the dirt and got back on pavement all the way into town, we had our own lane with a couple police officers manning the one intersection. So a far cry from many gravel come into town, and there's like, you know, maybe a volunteer or two, and you're mostly on your own. So it was a totally different feel, much more like a small-time pro race in that regard. There are many reasons why gravel races have been run outside the auspices of USA Cycling. They can do it on their own rules. They don't have to have rules. They don't have to mess with the bureaucracy or the fees of operating underneath USA Cycling. There's no categorization. You can have a one big mass start. Everybody starts together, which is something I really appreciate about gravel racing. There are, of course, downsides to do it on your own. One, you may have to learn lessons the hard way that an organization that's been regulating bike racing for decades has. So, you know, if this was a high school debate class, I could argue either side pretty easily as to the pros of having a race run by USA Cycling or organized by USA Cycling and a race that has nothing to do with that. But like many people, I was very curious to see what this thing would look and feel like. And it felt like a safe national championship course. It did not feel like a gravel race party. I talked to a number of riders about their perceptions of safety of this race compared to others, and just their general impressions of this race compared to others. Starting with Matt Stevens, a guy who's been racing gravel for well over a decade with his wife Lauren, who won the women's elite title.
Back in the day, you know, we all started together, and you've got guys that want to finish, and you got a couple guys that are fast and want the podium. And yeah, we self-regulate, and you know, you're not fighting 50 guys for a blind corner. You're looking out for each other, calling out everything, calling out rocks and everything. You want to race on its merits and see who has the best legs. But as it's been more competitive and the results mean more to everyone, it's been, I wouldn't say cutthroat, but more aggressive racing and fighting for the front. However, USA Cycling, I think, did a great job today. Almost every intersection that mattered had a marshal, someone watching out for us, and that's important. These events that bring a lot of racers, why not spend a little money on volunteers or police and escorts and make the race safe for everyone? So provide that safety element for the races, and that's important. That's why I appreciated it today, appreciated it at UCI Worlds, and it's been nice.
I talked to Lauren the day before she won the race on how gravel racing has changed and what she thought about the USA Cycling format of having separate fields for the men and women and then amateurs as other categories.
I'm excited that there's a separate start for the women for national championships. I think when it comes to like having something like that on the line, it's important to have a separate field. And with the prize money that's put up here, it's important to have a separate field and not have other races affecting. I wish that the distance was more equal on time versus equal on distance. So like if we had more of like 110 mile race, I think that would be more accurate for the women's field. But other than that, I'm excited about it.
What do you think about just the concept of a national gravel championships? Is that something that was exciting from the get-go, or were you one of these people like myself who was skeptical of it when it was first announced?
Yeah, you see the other countries already doing it. Italy had theirs last year, and I'm sure other countries did also. And it's, bringing more exposure to the sport is the same thing I said about having a UCI World Championships. The more exposure we can bring to cycling, the better. And it doesn't change the other racing that we already have.
How many years have you been racing gravel now? It's been quite a few.
Yeah, I looked it up. My first gravel race was in 2012. Nice. At the Chainring Massacre in Texas on probably some 28 really hard tires with tubes most likely, because we didn't have this whole tubeless thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Times have changed.
Yeah, times have changed. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more comfortable. You're not getting rattled so much. You can rail the corners a lot better with these wider tires.
Yeah. Good luck to you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I also talked to the top 3 in the men's race. Brennan Wirtz got 3rd, Alexei Vermeulen in 2nd, and Keegan Swinson, who, to no one's great surprise, took the first ever Stars and Stripes jersey.
It was just cool to be here, to be part of this inaugural event. It's a special moment for all of us here in the sport, and it's just, yeah, exciting to be a part of it. Day went well. You know, the usual stuff, a puncture, a little bit of chasing, a crash that I just narrowly dodged. Unfortunately, a big group of guys went down, and that sort of was the first proper split in the race. Hope those guys are all okay. And then it was about, yeah, maybe 10 or 12 of us for quite a while, a couple of hours, working really well together. Super, super strong crosswind, just echelon completely across the road. And then, yeah, at the end it came down to 8 of us going into the final climb. We hit a super solid attack, and it was Alexei, Keegan, and Payson that got away. And I was maybe 10 or 15 meters behind them, and then another 10 or 15 meters back to John Borstelman out of our group of 8. And I was able to come back to those first 3 over the crest. Got up with them. And then from there was a couple more attacks. I went all in on an attack sort of as we started the descent. We came into the tailwind, and I just knew like that was my chance. And it was a first for me. I fully spun out my 50-10. I felt like I needed more gear than that on a gravel race. So yeah, times are changing, speeds are increasing, but super cool to be here and to come down to a sprint in the end. Fortunately, Keegan got away from us, but hats off to him. I mean, obviously he's riding super strong this year. But yeah, it was fun. It was a super awesome race, and just really enjoyable atmosphere, cool event, and super, super happy to be a part of it.
That's it. Alexei Vermeulen, 2nd at the first ever USA Second Gravel Championships. Congratulations, sir. How did you find the racing today?
Thanks, it's very hard. Lots of sand, lots of wind, everything you told me beforehand. I think when you go and race nationals, it's always a little bit different because there's more than just pride and money on the line. It's a little bit special shirt, so you got to kind of find where you're willing to risk it. We definitely had a little negative race in the beginning, but once the race started, it was kind of on all day, and that's the kind of racing I like to do.
How about the organization? How similar or how different was this race to the big ones or the small ones that you've been doing for the last couple of years?
I mean, I can't say I really saw a difference. Like, you race with the same guys, so I think that makes it feel different. Definitely a little bit more road closures than normal, but other than that, it's just you're just out riding dirt roads for as long as you can until you get bored. Then you have to go hard to the finish. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think overall, like, there's more people than I expected to be here, which is awesome, especially at the finish line. And didn't get a chance to go down the water slide, but that looked really cool.
There's still time. There's still daylight.
It's closed.
Aww.
I know. I watched some
missed opportunities.
It was bad.
Missed opportunities. Well,
should have rode faster.
Things to do next year. You know?
Yeah.
Get a shirt, do the water slide.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know. Overall, feelings about first Gravel Nationals is awesome, and I'll be back. I need a year to come back to Nebraska and race again, but I'll be back.
Congratulations on winning first ever Gravel National title. What was your experience racing that compared to other gravel races you've done? Did it feel different? Did it feel the same? How was
it was definitely a bit of a different vibe today. Having like the only like a pro men's start, elite men's start was kind of cool. It definitely changed the dynamic of the race. Didn't seem nearly as hectic at the start. I feel like everyone was a little less nervous. Obviously at call-up really doesn't matter because there's only 60 riders, and the rolling closures were really nice too. Felt a little bit safer out there than normal. That was always welcome. So, and the course was marked. That was also cool. Otherwise, good racing. Everyone was competitive from the start. John and the guy and a couple other dudes attacked Vogel and I can't remember the third rider. Anyway, they attacked like 6 miles in. So it went. The race went from the start, and then it was a bit of attrition and trying to get guys to work. And it's a bummer there was a big crash as well. It was trying to kind of create a separation. You know, it seemed like a lot of guys that had the DNF had broken bikes or they were hurt. So, you know, never loved to see that. But it definitely that blew the race out right before this like gnarly sandy bit. Yeah, I mean it was kind of a crazy day of racing. It was super windy. The surface was wild. Like never raced on a surface like that. You can to add to that, it was like sandy and loose and like kind of rocky and just not really friendly to ride on. So it made that challenging. Like trying because we had the echelon across the road and the crosswinds, and you're trying to ride different lines and find where it works.
Like, do you want the draft? Do you want the hard pack?
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to find that balance, you know. Yeah, no, awesome day.
Being such the clear favorite, does that affect how you race? I mean, or you feel like, you know, all eyes on you at all times?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it definitely has to change the way. It definitely affects the way that I race. You have to like be cognizant of that and knowing like what think what they might do to, you know, to try and you know, upset me or like change it up. So I think also, you know, I have to think on my feet and adapt a bit out there to see what's going on. But I mean, right now there's not a whole lot of big teams. You know, like Tug and I are a team, and then there's a couple others. So it's everyone's still kind of racing for themselves. So it's in the end, it's still a pretty fair fight. But yeah, no, it's definitely, you know, keeping me on my toes.
Yeah, well, congratulations on winning that fight. Well deserved.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Before I talk about the bike itself, let's talk about some of the peripherals, including the DJI Action Cam 4. This sucker left me frustrated and a bit sour because it stayed on the entire time until the memory card filled up. I went back and checked the settings. Like the GoPro, which it's trying to emulate, you can set the auto run feature to shut off after a certain number of minutes. I've got it set at 5 minutes, which I double check after, just in case, you know, you forget to hit the button or you don't, you know, you're not sure if you hit the stop button, it will stop so you don't use the whole card. That did not work and it burned through the entire card. So that is my mea culpa for why I don't have as much footage from this race as I would like to have. My other beef with this is that the sound is not nearly as loud as on the GoPro for turning off and turning on. It's got distinct noises for the off and on, but it's just harder to hear. And the tactile sensation is less dramatic than on the GoPro. So for these reasons, I'm gonna stick with my GoPro because this thing is reliable. I love the fact that this is magnetic and you can, you can clip it on and unclip pretty easily from the mount. So sometimes I'll put that on the front of the bike and then have a friend's bike set with a mount on the saddle. Like here, I've got it on my buddy John Tarkington's bike, filming on the day before. So that part's handy. And if you're just wanting to film during rides and not races, that could be handy. But for just all around reliability, I'm finding this guy subpar to the old GoPro. Inside the tires, trusty Orange Seal did not let me down. You know, getting back after the race, I was looking through the tire and I've got, you know, at least 4 or 5 goat heads in there. Did not stop me at all. Thank you, Orange Seal, for that. On a chain, this time around, I was running Muck-Off's Ludicrous AF lube, just because I'd ran out of wax. You know, I find it funny talking to World Tour mechanics about stuff they're using, and occasionally journalists will find something that's non-sponsor correct being used, and like, oh, is that the absolute fastest? Is that the secret sauce? And the mechanics will be like, no, man, we just like ran out of our sponsor stuff, and we're in the middle of a 3-week tour, so we just picked this up and went with it. That's kind of why I chose this. I'm out of wax and tried this. So it was a little bit dirtier than wax, but it was also quiet throughout. Sometimes with wax, it will not last quite as long as I would like. 131 miles or whatever it was, you know, maybe on the borderline, especially when it's really windy and, you know, getting sandblasted on the chain. But so I ended up with a dirtier, greasier chain, but it was quiet. Is this the world's fastest lube, as it says in tiny print on the bottom? I don't know, but it worked just fine. Other things that worked just fine, carrying hydration on the back. This course had 5 stops, had 4 neutral aids, and then at mile 90, a place where outside support could come and help. Thank you to Cash Monday, father of Area Monday, who was racing the women's elite and got 9th, I want to say. Certainly top 10, well done in her second ever gravel race. Cash asked if he could help me out. I said, yes, absolutely, please. Could you take one of these to the feed? So I started with the USWE pack, 2 liters on there. And then at the 90 mile point, did a quick pit stop and grabbed this Camelback Chase. USWE is nice in that there's no pockets. It's just super minimalist hydration pack, period. The Camelback Chase, which is basically an adapted running vest, has a couple pockets on either side. It's slimmed down from how it started, but there's still, you know, a zipper pouch and then a looser pouch here. Some of my friends have cut the bags off. This time I actually used it. I put my little thing of pickle juice on this side and then had some gels in here. Figuring that'd be one way to just grab this thing like a musette and a hydration pack built in. So that was nice to have, not just this part, but most crucially, a friend in the feed zone. So thank you, Cash and Area, for helping me out there. Starting a day that has, you know, it was like 5,600 feet of climbing with 2 liters of water plus, you know, 2 tall boys of water, it always gets in my head a little bit of, yes, it'll be nice to have enough hydration that you don't have to stop, but this is a lot of extra weight. And the hardest part for me of the race was like mile 18, 19, pretty steep climb where I ended up doing like 370 watts for 10 minutes and then like 410 watts for 5 minutes, and was just barely able to make it with the front split of 15 or so there. And of course, at that point, I'm thinking, you know, if I didn't have all this extra weight, it might be a little bit easier, but you know, that was just 1 or 2 minutes of difficulty compared to having hours of hydration. So I, like many others, vote with going for a little extra weight with the benefit of not having to stop nearly as often. Well, I took on an extra Camelback at the end. One of the guys in our group took the opportunity to strip down to just his bibs at the end. Was clearly planning to do that because he had his number pinned onto the back of the bibs. So yeah, not only no pack, but no jersey for the last 40 miles. So gravel racing, you know, you can do it however you like. Another piece I love is trusty Edge 830. Despite having a cracked screen, use this for a couple of reasons. One, it's easier to set up with different sensors, heart rate sensors, different power meters. I use the SRM pedals here, and you can scroll through the pages on the Di2, so love that. Was using the SRM pedals, which I prefer to the Garmin rallies, but still do not prefer to just a crank-based or a spider-based power meter because this bike has these E13 cranks, so I can't just pop on the trusty old status meter there. Another peripheral piece I've been digging recently are these KOO glasses, KOO. These have a dual tint. It's darker up here and lighter down here, so for the bright sunlight that's pretty well damped, but then down here it's still easy enough to read your computer. So, and critically, it stays snugly in the helmet. I wish helmet and sunglass companies would work together more on a small, but in my humble estimation, critical feature of having a nice snug place to store the glasses. This Giro Aries helmet has a couple little rubber bumpers on there to add a little bit of grip. So yeah, simple thing, but dig these glasses. They're no super cheap gooders, but they're also not like the hyper expensive Oakleys, kind of middle of the road price range. And yeah, so far so good. Like these things. I'll put links to all this stuff down below if you want to check out more. This video is supported by Buycycle, an online used bike marketplace that has more than 16,000 bikes online. They just opened shop in the US. They've got more than 1,000 gravel bikes online right now. There are 2 main types of bikes on Buycycle. There are refurbished bikes, which are, as the name implies, refurbished at Buycycle's headquarters in Germany and shipped from there. And then there are individual sellers, either bike shops or private individuals, who sell bikes and will ship them straight to you. As a seller, you can post your bike on Buycycle, and then Buycycle will send you a bike box and shipping materials so you can sell your bike and ship it that way. The prices look pretty competitive. There are a couple fees added, especially for North American customers. There's a buyer protection fee of more than $100 and then a customs fee. There's shipping, which could be a substantial, probably more than $100, but since Buycycle just opened in the US, its first US customers can get free shipping with the code free shipping USA. If you pick up the bike direct, there is no cost, but that's probably more applicable to folks in Germany than those of us in the US, at least for now. There are many familiar brands: Specialized, Canyon, Trek, Scott, Cannondale, and maybe some that are not as familiar to you, such as the German brands Rose and Cube. Go check out the site. It's buycycle.com. Okay, let's talk about this bike, the Argonaut GR3. I first rode this bike when it launched a few months ago back in Bend, Oregon, home to Argonaut. There's a few unique things going on with this bike, aside from the fact that it's handmade out of carbon in Bend, Oregon. One thing is that it's relatively short, like racy front end in terms of height, but also relatively slack, much more akin to an adventure gravel bike than a gravel race bike. Ben Farber's thinking on this was that you want your body to be in a race position for bike races, but that in a lot of gravel races, it's not just how well you go on the climbs, but how comfortable you are at speed in often loosey-goosey surfaces with limited visibility that can determine how well you do in the race. I appreciated the sentiment, but I thought that the bike just kind of felt sluggish when on pavement. Like when you're on the dirt, having more trail, slacker front end, that makes sense. But with gravel, we're riding all the surfaces, right? Like that's part of the point of the discipline, is that it's a variety of terrains and surfaces, and sometimes pavement, or at least really fast running dirt, hard packed road is part of that. So I wasn't totally sold. Ben came back and said, hey, how about you try this bike on your home roads and your home trails, see how it feels. Fantastic, thank you very much. So he shipped this out with a slightly different configuration than I had tested. It's got GRX Di2, which I love, but then it's paired with some E13 componentry, a 42 tooth ring, and then a 946 cassette. Part of why I took this bike to nationals was because it has the biggest gear of anything in my garage. So that's bigger than a 4410 top gear, which is SRAM's setup. A lot of SRAM bikes come with 40 teeth rings. I put on a 44, which has got a power meter. It's bigger than the 2x GRX I have, which has a top gear of 4811. I cannot keep track of all these things in my head, but bikecalc.com can, and I'll put that link down below. So I just plugged in those three things to see, okay, which is the biggest gear? And turns out 42.9 was the one. I tried to put a 44 on another bike I have here, a Riverside. Haven't heard of this? Neither did I. Put the crank on there and we're just spinning it around on the stand and heard a noise and realized, oh, that's the sound of the chainring digging into the frame. So I guess that's not gonna work. That bike had, deeper aero wheels on there, and I was kind of debating, do I run this with the bigger gear and non-aero wheels, or do I go with a bike that's got aero wheels? And that was kind of the final decider for me, is like, well, I'm not getting aero wheels with a 44 ring, so I'll go with the bigger gear. And I mean, not that these are box rims, but not full-on aero wheels. Why bigger gear? Because the last 20 miles or so, 25 miles of the course, downhill, and most days has a screaming tailwind. When I was out in Gering a few weeks ago shooting the preview video, we got those normal conditions where there was a wind coming out of the west, and I was completely spun out in the 40 tooth ring that I had at the time. So that was my thinking, that if I could get my carcass over that hill in a front group, I want to be able to pedal in the bike race and not just sit there coasting and waiting for the road to flatten out so I could pedal. So that was part of why I took this bike. So I wanted to test out Ben's theory of whether having a more confident, longer trail, yet low stack geo would be ideal for gravel racing. And the course and conditions did deliver on some of that sketchiness, particularly earlier on in the day when the sun light level was low and there's just a ton of dust when we're on the minimum maintenance road. You can hardly see anything. You just see, helmets in front of you. You can't see the track as dust is getting kicked up. So you're doing that thing where like, should I be close to the wheel and have more of a draft, or should I back up so I could actually see what's going on? And at one point I saw Phil Tinsman's feet up where his head should be as a crash took out a few people, and there were a few crashes earlier on. Some of that's the nature of racing, and some of that was limited visibility in deep squirrely sand. At no point, however, did I wish, I wish this bike had twitchier twitchier handling and shorter trails. So Ben Farver, yes, in these conditions, I'm not going to argue that you were wrong by putting a bit of a longer trail front end geo on a gravel race bike. It was interesting racing in relatively smaller fields. There was probably 500 or 600 racers total, but they were broken up in chunks. The women's race, as Lauren mentioned, was 22 riders or something like this, and over the course of 131 very windy, crosswindy, sandy miles, groups got blown to smithereens. Our group had ages from 19 up through the old guy category, the 45 to 50 category. So at any given point, as groups are coalescing off the front, you're trying to do the math of, okay, how many of those folks are in my age group? In my age group, 45 plus, Andrew Wright came in as a favorite, having won both the National Time Trial and the National Road Race for the last 2 years running. Clearly the powerhouse. He went clear with another rider in a younger category at like mile 50 or something. We still had miles and miles to go, at least 70 miles still to go, in a portion where there was a strong crosswind, and then we were heading back towards a lot of headwind. And when he went, I was with another 45 plus guy in this group of 15 or so. We're looking at each other. I was like, yeah, we like our chances here of 15 versus 2. Turns out Andrew's chances were better, having the engine to drive it with another guy, and they stayed away to the finish. So congrats on that. What would I have changed? Well, aside from maybe trying to mark Mr. Wright there when he went and racing for the jersey, I probably would have gone with my skinnier 40 tires instead of these 45 mil tires. Some of my thinking of going with the bigger tire was that it was so sandy, and having a bit of float over that would have been a positive thing. Like so many things in gravel racing, you can only optimize for portions. You can't optimize for the whole thing, but probably having a little extra weight wasn't the right call. Having a deeper, more aero wheel probably would have helped, but they're relatively small things. I was happy with the gearing range for sure. I wish I could have had a different power meter set up. So nothing against the E13 cranks as cranks, but I'd prefer to have an integrated power meter built in there. Really, I guess the main thing I would have changed was my head. Kind of gave up at the very end when we hit that steep climb. I was with a group of younger riders, and Andrew Wright I thought was long gone. We hadn't seen him for some time. So when the younger riders started attacking each other, I came off that pace figuring I'm not going to catch Andrew, and whoever's behind me in my group isn't going to catch me. Realized after the fact, hours later, that group of younger guys that I was with did end up making contact with Andrew in the closing miles. So coulda, shoulda, woulda, but that's something that gives me motivation for next year. Many of us enjoy talking about gravel racing as a spectrum, mullet racing, business in the front, party at the back, and then a lot of us somewhere in between. Gravel Nationals was very much the front end of the mullet, the business side. People like me wanted to get a jersey for the efforts, and there was very little of the partying part. Does a gravel race need to have a party? Not necessarily. I think events can learn from each other and differentiate what their attraction is to different types of riders. That said, I think the folks putting on Gravel Nationals could learn from some of the long-standing gravel races about the fun and camaraderie and community benefits of having multiple days of festivities around an event. Also, I think some of the gravel promoters could learn from coming out to Gravel Nationals next year to see how it is run in terms of the safety components, whether that's folks on motos or the fencing or the overall infrastructure. For instance, there was a mobile command center in the parking lot, the giant RV, where folks from Medalists were in constant contact with people out on course. Just one more way in which gravel continues to evolve, and I'm eager to see where it goes. And I'm eager to get back next year and take another crack at getting my own Stars and Stripes jersey. So that's it for me on this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And whether you like the party at the back or the business at the front, I hope you enjoy the ride.
I don't wanna save ya, don't wanna be strangers. Let me feel your love on me. Leave your head and let your mind be free. Save yourself and leave the words you spoke. Lay your love on me. Leave your head and let your mind be free. Save yourself and leave